you have, and he will also inform me. So at this time, we have a short agenda, but it can be kind of strenuous if we let it. So at this time, Madam Clerk, would you call the first item, please?
The first item is the first reading of the mid-year budget amendments. Mr. Malazzi. Mr. Malazzi?
Yes, okay. I was saying that the memo, the presentation that I'll be making is the summary of the memo that came to you, as well as the budget ordinance that you are going to act on. And as you all know that we are doing the budget amendment due to the shortfall of the revenues that we have because of the pandemic that we are all aware of. So these budget amendments, if accepted and approved, will help us to still provide the services as well as to make it into the end of this fiscal year. We have gone through management and departments, we have gone through these budget amendments. There will be several changes as we go about. We may have more shortfall of revenues, or our revenues may improve. But as of now, this is what we can to make sure that we are in balance of our fiscal year budget as required by the state. And at the same time, in case I forget or the city manager may still bring it up, as we amend this budget, this is the kickoff of our 2021 budget. So what we have here will be rolled into 2021 as our budget, and we'll be working on it. With that, let's start and have the next slide, please. The second slide. So the 2020 amended general fund revenue is projected to have a shortfall of $11.4 million, as we stated. And that shortfall calls for us to make some adjustments in our expenses so we can have a balanced budget. Various tax-related expense revenues are the most impacted one. And one of them would be sales tax. As we talked about, people stop purchasing almost end of February, March. They stopped spending money. With that, we have most impacted one are the tax-related revenues. There are not enough revenues flowing in from service fees for different operations. Other areas that are still producing or they are still processing revenues, and one of them is the building permit. They are still bringing in money as we talk, but that may not be enough to make up for the shortfalls that we have in the various areas of revenue generations. The reduction of revenues will persist for an extended period of time, and that will be beyond 2021. And the occupational taxes will be one of them, as we mentioned the last time, that the occupational tax levy is coming from what businesses produced in the previous year. So like what they're producing now is what they will report next year. So if they have produced nothing now, or their earnings are not enough, that means next year when they renew their business license, will not get much of the revenue. So 2022 revenue, which will come from 2021, 2020, 2021, may still not be as rosy as expected. We anticipate to receive some revenues, but those revenues may not be enough. If I go to the slide number 3. So these are some of the these are projections of reductions. I wanted to emphasize on property tax, how it comes to that, because some may ask to say, we receive property tax at the beginning of the fiscal year. how come we are still projecting? Remember, these are projections. We still project that we will be shortfall of, or we are not going to correct the remaining $5.1 million. Yes, we collect most of the taxes at the beginning of the fiscal year. The majority of it is October, November, December. However, every year we still have got areas where we don't receive it all. So from March, April, May, June, July, as we go, we still receive at the end of the fiscal year, that 5.1 may end up being 300,000 or 400,000. When we close the fiscal year, we get into the following year, we call that one previous revenues. But this year, with what is happening, it's very unlikely that people will be paying it. They have been paying, but from March, we have seen the pay has really gone down. If we were receiving maybe 600,000, now we are receiving maybe less than 100,000. So it's not that we receive everything at the beginning of the fiscal year. There is still some that we receive it slowly. Then we have sales tax. Sales tax was budgeted at $25 million. We have received only $12 million. It's unlikely that we are going to receive more than $80 million. So even though we are saying we are shortfall of $3.2 million, we may end up with more than that. It may end up maybe $4 million. And that $5 million for property tax may be way, way, way down. People may pay more that side. Then we have permits, 122,000. Permits with the way it is now, we are very sure that we are going to recoup that, or we are even going to surpass. But as of now, that's what we are expecting to be a shortfall. Municipal court, as all of you know that we have been closed, and soon I think we'll be opening. We don't know how much we'll be getting, since it will not be in first court. So we still project to have $108,000 in the court fees. If we go to the fourth slide. Changes made to revenues. These are highlights of where changes have been made. Expenditure reduction on expenditure include governing body. So these are cuts that we have made. We are talked about revenues. Now we're getting into expenses. Some departments have seen greater reduction than others. As you know, some departments are bigger, some departments are smaller. And it's not only that, you have public works is a bigger department, but seeing their needs, they need some more money. So this is the time we move money from one department where there's a real, where there is something, to the areas where there's a real need. And again, it depends on management. This is the time they have to reallocate the needs. They have to prioritize the needs. So where they see there's real need, that's where we may give the money and remove where we feel like they can do with some reductions. Public works is one of those good examples. Public works, instead of it being reduced by $1.1 million, we end up giving it $500,000 to do some of the very pressing services. Then we have also general services. General services, as you all know, it's not a department. It's a department that is a division that is under public works, but providing services to all departments across the city. So instead of general services reduced by 668,000, we are going to give them again 500,000 so they can meet maintenance, they can meet gas shortage that they have in their budget. So you will see the the combination of the two, public works and general services, we cut our expenditure reduction that we projected by $1.8 million. In other words, our projected reduction was shortfall again by 1.8 that we failed to reduce from public works as well as the general services. In addition to that, we gave them 500,000 each. So it's almost $2.8 million that was shortfall that we are supposed to recoup, but we had to give it, we had to reallocate. And that's why I'm saying it's due to inability of some departments to meet estimated expenditures. Only $7.8 million has been so far reduced from these departments from our original projected $9.8 million. So even $9.8 million was less than what we projected revenues to be shortfall, because revenues we projected to have a shortfall of 11.4. But if we were to implement our 15% with all departments, we would have still gotten only $9.8 million. And another $4.2 million has been appropriated to various areas that we are going to see. If I would have the following slide. So these are some of the deductions that we have made to make up for the $7.8 million. So governing body, we have reduced their budgets by $85,000. The city clerk, we have reduced it by 72. The city clerk is one of the small departments that there was nowhere out would have taken what the 15% was. So the best we could do is to remove 72,300. And the city manager's budget was reduced by 218,000. Finance was reduced by 415. Finance has got different divisions. And again, we had to assist some departments that had a shortfall. So finance had to put it additional 100,000 to make up for the divisions, as well as other departments that could not be, could meet their appropriated reduction. Human resources is one of the small departments that almost other than personnel, they have very little operating, and operating for HR is that goes to every department. As you all know, we have employees there, we have got the public hearings, the personnel, all those things are for every department, even though it's under human resources. So human resources is one of the departments that had to be assisted to make up to that 113, because you wouldn't get the entire 113 from human resources, they wouldn't make it. Communications, 124. Then we have municipal court, 152. Some of these ones you are saying it's not operational. Some of those is a mixture of operations as well as personnel. As you know that we had the freeze of most of the non-essential employees. So court is one of them that are giving up their employees and filled positions. Next slide. It's a continuation of our expenditure reduction. Police, as you see, they are the biggest department, but at the same time, they have done the best to help us to make it into this reduction be come to where it is, plus fire. As you see, police's budget has been reduced by $2.3 million. So their budget has moved from $15 million to $13 million. And that one takes a very good administration to do what they have done. For their understanding, we can't appreciate more for their understanding to keep us going. Fire and rescue, the same, they have reduced their budget by 2.2 for several reasons they have done, even though they are really public works personnel were deemed as essential. They have still strived to make it to fill those positions deferred, and that's why we are even talking to this. And they have managed with what they have without compromising delivery of public safety duties. Public works, there's zero, that we couldn't take anything from public works. Parks and recreation is 805,000, and the majority of that is freezing the non-filled positions. Community and regulatory affairs is 759,000. Then we have Destination South Fulton with 113, which is a freeze of unfilled positions plus operations. So with all the deductions that we have made, with our shortfall of $11.4 million, we were only able to reduce our expenses with $7.8 million. If I'll go to the next slide. At the same time, it's not just reducing the budgets. We have some needs that we had to reallocate or to make appropriations to some areas. We are where we are here because of how we started our 2020. We started our 2020 fiscal year with a very good cash balance that we had from 2019, regardless of what, but we had good. And with what we have received, plus that's the one that has made us, that has made the management to be boldly say, we are going to keep all our employees up to the end of the fiscal year. We have enough to keep our employees, we have enough to provide services, and we have enough to meet the bills, obligations that we have. With that, we still want to do the same, even not at that much, but we still want to do the same. When we end this fiscal year, we want to end with something. So we are projecting to end our fiscal year with $2 million as a jumpstart of 2021. At the same time, general services, as we have mentioned, they will need to have about 500,000 to keep them going, provide the services that they need. Legal, you know that we have two lines. We have line that is a fixed contract for the legal, then we have litigation where we get payments for different legal expenditures. So that line, as you recall, we removed the 400,000 that was to help us for emergency. And that line needs to be funded to keep us going to finish this fiscal year. So if we will need it, there's that 500,000 allocated to that. If we don't, then it will be reallocated again in different areas of the general fund. Contingency, we are putting aside $500,000. This is in terms of when we are going to go back to our facilities. There will be several things that we'll need. We may need monitoring testing machines. We will need the temperature taking. I mean, there will be quite a lot that departments have been going through of what things they will need. We will need also the various equipments. We will need the PPE. All those ones will be part of that. So we are putting that one aside to be together with whatever will remain from that 400 allocation that will prepare us for the opening of our facilities. Then we have Destination South Fulton. They will need about $250,000. That can be a boost to small business sustainability. So with all those, we have reallocated $4.2 million. If I have this next slide and the last slide. So this is a summary. Everything I'm talking here, they are in the memo or they are in the ordinance. So this is a summary of the ordinance that you'll be working on, that you'll be considering. The top part of this is the summary of revenues, and the bottom part is the summary of the expenditures. So second column from left is talking about the adopted budget. This is where we started from. So we had our general fund when we adopted in October 2019, it was $73,821,952. Then we made several amendments And the last amendment we had, amendment number 4, our general fund, which is the first line on top, the middle one, came to 75,361,671. Now we are adjusting because of this shortfall. If you see the column towards the last column on your right, general fund now is coming down to 68,760,907. Then the rest of those funds, where you see a dot, that means there's no change. We have restricted fund 41. Now it's up to $5 million. You had hotel, motel, no change, 240,000. TIS plus, no change, $17.5 million. And you have capital projects, $10.4 million. Solid waste, 520. Capital grant fund, $1.2 million, for a total of $103,899,703. This is our combined total budget. General fund with all other funds, these are our revenues. So it's 103 from 110 adjusted. Then we get into expenses. Our general fund expenditures when we started the fiscal year was $69 million. And you see the middle one, which was the number 4 adjusted or amended, it was $70 million. Now, just general fund without the transfers, it's $63 million. Then when you add all those transfers, which we make transfers to capital projects, we made some transfers to capital funds, we make transfers to the debt. When you include all those ones, then it comes to an expenditure of general fund of $68 million. So when you add all those ones at the bottom of it, you find on the expenditure is 103, which is the same as the revenue total of 103,899,703. Having said that, I'm available and Mr. Donald can chip in at any time if you have any comments, you have any questions. As you know that ordinance, budget ordinance, it has to be read twice. It doesn't mean that once you have this today, people should start spending pending the second reading. So in other words, everything is frozen to what has been proposed here. So don't spend anything beyond what is remaining in your budget after the reductions.
Mr. Malazi, I think one thing I would want to add, I just noticed, I think on the appropriation side, there's $500K that's not included for PW. I know we talked about it. I just think for the visual, I saw it earlier. It may have been, I may be missing it, but I do think the other thing to just kind of highlight and note is that even though these cuts have occurred and we're making some changes or recommending changes to ensure we successfully end the fiscal year, it will be with a positive projected fund balance for the first time in the city's history, and we'll roll over cash balances into FY21. So the city's fiscal position is still extremely strong despite the pandemic, and I think it also highlights that we have always managed appropriately, and now we're working to beat the budget, and we've been successfully doing so. And I think we'll even beat this budget and hopefully have additional savings as we roll into the next fiscal year.
Okay, well, we truly hope so. Ms. Willis, you're in the queue. Mr. Pascal, Ms. Willis is on.
I am too.
I have a question.
Let me write, Ms. Gill, do you have mechanical problems?
No, I am in Novus. I did that about 10 minutes ago.
Okay, I got you written down. Go ahead, Ms. Willis.
And so thank you for the presentation, Mr. Donald, and also Mr. Malazi. Mr. Malazi, just for clarification, you did not freeze our funding so we can't expend any, we can't use our budget. Did I hear you say you froze our money?
No. We have
Okay.
not frozen. We are not going to do anything. I'm just saying don't spend more than what is remaining out of reduction. For instance, for you, which I needed to talk about the council people, you say you have the uniform 10,000 deduction. That 10,000, the first where we went was to look into your travel. Then we had to look into your training. So other than that, if we found enough there, that means everything is there. So just saying, other than the 10,000, don't spend more than what is remaining after a reduction of 10,000.
Okay. My other concern is we have only been in this COVID-19 pandemic. Probably it started late March. And so late March, April, May, June, not even, and June just started today. So probably less than 2 months. And I'm just concerned of why we have such a huge shortfall of $11 million. That's a lot of money to have a shortfall of within less than 2 months.
So what is happening to us is what is happening everywhere. And as the city manager has said, we are really lucky. Just imagine to say that we are not getting paid, we are not getting revenue March, April, May, June, July, August, September, 7 months. So it's the inflow is not coming in. But at the same time, even when we were getting like April, we received half of what we are spending. So spending will not stop. It's the incoming revenue, it's the stopping of activities in the country, in the state, everywhere that they are frozen revenues. So we are projecting here, as I said, they may change, but the change doesn't look that pleasing. So it's everywhere. For us, if it was without the cash that we had, the shortfall would have been even more. You see it to be more, but it's not as it is somewhere. Of course, we can't compare with others.
I don't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. Thank you. But are you saying that you're projecting a shortfall? So this projection of the budget amendment is accounting for us anticipating not collecting revenue through September?
Not collecting much, not collecting as projected, because we are already seeing, as you can see on sales tax, we started collecting $2.4 million a month. This one now, the last one we have collected is 1.5, almost $1 million shortfall.
Okay, so one thing I didn't see on the revenue side is what happened to the insurance premium tax?
Insurance premium, that one, there's no shortfall because we got even more than what we budgeted. We budgeted for.
But I didn't see it. Maybe I missed it, but I didn't see it on the intake revenue. I didn't see that on the revenue side.
It's on other taxes. If you see on other taxes, is the 7 million. So it's in other taxes because premium is also taxed.
Okay, so I didn't see that. Maybe it was on, can you show me where you put that?
So if you see on the details, now here we have just showing only areas that are affected. So it's not every line that is here, it's revenue. We are showing only lines that have been affected. So premiums is not part of this one.
Okay. And
premium brought us more. Actually, it helped us more than 2 million than we projected.
Okay, I'm gonna yield. I'm still don't understand, and maybe I'll get some time with Mr. Donald and you because I still think that's a lot of money. $11 million, even with through September. I don't understand.
So, I will be available, Councilwoman Willis, after this to walk you through in details.
But also, I think Councilmember Willis, and how I have come to understood the method that they've used for projections and So one thing is, I think the reports that we've talked about a few times have to be updated because we want to show all of the revenue. And I think the pictures don't show, or this presentation doesn't
Right.
clearly show all of the revenues in line for you to see all of them in one singular place. Presentation issue that can be corrected. But I think when you start talking about the projections and revenue shortfalls, I'll just take you back to the fact that the level of revenues that you're looking to project, we know is going to decrease. While you can use a variety of different methods, it looks as though our finance team has decided to look at past collections year over year based on February, March, and April, because all of those months were completed at the time, and then given a soft look at the trends for May. As a result, you see that you're collecting, let's call it 80% less revenue, and you're only bringing in 20% of what you normally collect. They are then using that rationale to show if we only collected 20% of our revenue, this is what the shortfall will be. So I think the logic is pretty clear, and it probably becomes more evident when you take into account our greatest avenues are sales tax and property taxes. With those two being not only the greatest amount, we are not collecting those other small amount of revenues, whether it be franchise fees and others, during this time. So overall, we have a lower amount of possible revenues based on our mix, and all of them are collecting at lower amounts. As a result, we receive a larger deficit than likely anticipated. That's the simplest way I can explain that.
Mr. Donna, that was very helpful. That was very helpful. Thank you for the explanation. What would be helpful is if you all provide that level of detail in reports, like what we collected last year as opposed to what we have currently, and then all of our revenues. And one last thing is, I know that we've been asked to call
Miss Willis.
Yes.
Your time is out. You can come back and discuss it on your next opportunity.
Okay, I'll go ahead and
okay, Miss Gilliard, you're on the clock.
Okay, I have a couple of questions, and I think most of them, with the exception of one, Mr. Donald can answer. I want to know how information technology, police and fire, parks and recs, and particularly community and regulatory affairs are going to be impacted by the reduction. We see the reduction and we say that we're not laying off people. So in terms of non-personnel, this is like a lot, especially for parks and for community and regulatory affairs. So how are they going to be affected? And then the IGA with the city of Atlanta for 1.8 million that has been reduced. What are all of the details for that one? And then the last one is wait a minute, just give me 1 minute. Then the last one is T-SPLOS. There's been no reduction in revenue or expenses, and we know that it's driven by sales taxes. So I don't know why there's no projection for that.
So you asked a lot of questions at one time. I was trying to get you to ask them one. There were so many. I heard the one about T-SPLOS, and I heard the one about the reductions. I'll try to answer those, but you may have to come back to your other specifics.
Okay.
The one with the city of Atlanta, I'm not sure where that $1.8 million, I'll defer to the chief financial officer or city treasurer for that, but we have not received the level of revenues that the city of Atlanta is committed to. I think I've reported on that and identified a path forward. So that exact numbers, because that doesn't necessarily look right to me. I think it's around $400,000 to $500,000 per 6-month term, and so I wouldn't see us being behind 1.8 million in receipts from them, because those weren't the numbers that were shared with me. So I can't answer that, but we do know that Atlanta, simply put, has not kept their end of the bargain. And so we are in the process of having a discussion with them to finalize that or harsher requirements.
Okay.
When you look at how the departments are going to be impacted, they're going to be negatively impacted. There are projects and activities that were planned to be implemented that we now simply don't have the money for. And so now the burden on the staff gets a little bit harder to deliver these services, but with no additional revenues coming in from new sources that are substantial, and no additional, and still having the negative impact to the existing revenues, you have to reduce expenses. And so the decision, which I think is the right one that has been made to date by the council, is to make cuts outside of those that would negatively impact our staff. In doing so, that there are limited areas to be cut, which has informed the recommendations of the city treasurer.
So, so lastly, community and regulatory affairs. I think that we had a conversation about it in the last meeting, or maybe just you and I, but I do know that they do have the software to be able to take projects, development projects, online. I don't know if it's up and running yet, but I do know that people are waiting to try and get in and get their development projects going, which I think is excellent given the financial situation in the economy. If they can do it, we need to try our very best to make sure that they can get in and do whatever they, need to do to get their projects through. So, do you know whether or not that software is up and running? I probably should ask somebody else.
Yeah, so we provided a brief memorandum when we launched the software. And so the software has been moving forward. I think what you're talking about is just an additional module that we are implementing. So first, any projects that are in process have already been in the mix. I think I gave you some insights that we are looking at providing the ability for folks to be able to schedule online and phone conferences, so we can now accept those documents, but also walks folks through it. But permits as a whole is up. So planning and zoning is the next piece. So we've announced the permits part. Planning and zoning is the next piece, and that's being finalized as we speak. I think you also know code enforcement has been up, so it's up as well.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Gilliard. Mr. Khalid, you're on the clock.
Thank you so much. And I apologize, I was a little late. So if this has already been covered, is there a chart, Mr. Malazi, that shows by department the amount that has been cut, both in dollars and percent?
Yes, there is. If you go to, starting from template number 5, can you bring up template number 5, Miss White? Number 5.
And this, where might we find this? Because I don't see it in my email. Is it on our city's website?
It is in the memo that went to council, and it's in the budget ordinance. So you have it as the clerk's office sent it out to council on Friday. So you have there you have details. It's showing here governing bodies 85. So 85 is the makeup of the 710 plus 15.
I got you. It would be helpful if we could see the current budget and the proposed amendment on one page. That's it. That's all I got. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Khalid. Ms. Gums, you're on the clock.
Mr. Donald, I know we had mentioned this before. We had brought up the example of Atlanta receiving that $88 million to help them during the pandemic. And I know you mentioned that we did not qualify for that because of the size of our city. But have we qualified for any federal support to help us, I guess, to address this shortfall?
So not necessarily federally, other than the I think we reported. I think I sent you guys a note about the it's either 1.08, almost 1.1 million, or it's 1.8 million. I don't remember off the top of my head the reimbursement request that we have submitted, but we have submitted those, and so those would be reimbursable through the state, FEMA, and some of the Federal CARES Act funds that are distributed, what we'll call locally. Atlanta is a city of 500,000 or more folks, which reaches the threshold by which they can be a direct recipient. Fulton County is our direct recipient, and I know that, and I'll defer to the mayor on this, but I know that the mayors have already requested some funding for CDBG, and I believe they're putting together an additional formal request for cities to be able to get a formal allocation of Fulton County's CARES funds, because currently, under the resolution that they have, any funds not spent by November 1st, they would distribute to the cities. Well, we believe that they would have utilized those funds prior to November, and so we're asking them to do an allocation now. So other than what's in our control, the next step is the county who receives those federal funds. But any federal resource that's available to the city of South Fulton, we have applied for, and we are already sending our reimbursement submissions, although that is different from those additional grant funds that you're inquiring about.
So do we have an anticipated date of when we could possibly receive those reimbursements?
So no, I think we've talked about it before. Usually the cycle is about 3 months, but in times like this, when there's hurricanes or different natural disasters, and now the pandemic, the federal government can be very delayed in when they provide those funds. That's why we're taking the measures that we're taking, because we can't depend on receiving them at any point within this fiscal year. They make the rules on that, not us.
So if we do receive the funding, we will go back and adjust to where would that line item be on this? Where?
Probably a better question for Mr. Malazi. Mr. Malazi, what she's asking is, when we receive, so let's say, because a lot of that stuff is personnel, so let's say our overtime or payroll or whatever related to COVID-19 is reimbursed by an external entity. She's asking, how do those revenues show up on our overall balance? Because I know they would be in the balance sheet. I don't know where these things would be in the presentation as you provided.
So if we don't expect to receive any funding from federal government before end of this fiscal year, by any means, we don't expect any. We may get something maybe from Fulton County or from the state. Not that they're getting it from what they have, but once they know the allocation, they can give that money to us. That's the reason why always when you are using grants, FEMA grants, you have to have money that almost sometimes you don't have to count into to count for it, because it may take 6 months, it may take even a year before you get money from FEMA. So what we are doing here, we are doing like we are not expecting anything. Should it happen by God's grace that we receive that by September, which is almost remotely not, then we are going to make some adjustment. And our big accounting should be that we are going to start our new fiscal year at a good starting point. But we shouldn't be counting more on expecting from federal government that it will come. They may promise, but coming, it has got a lot of areas to go through. And again, I wanted to check with Mr. Donald, has already mentioned these deductions we have from fire, from police, from parks and recreation. We had non-filled positions. Of course, police and fire, they may have gone Beyond that, they have even gone into something positions that they can currently recruit. They have put a hold on that one to accommodate. But as management worked with them to make sure that they are putting on hold on recruitment does not affect the normal operations of the department. So most of those ones are non-filled positions. Then you have operations to make
that
it up.
word free is too.
Excuse me?
I'm in the queue.
Go ahead, Ms.
Are you-
Malazzi.
I have finished.
You have finished, okay.
I'm
I'm
done.
in the queue.
Okay, thank you, who to have, Ms. Gums. Ms. Willis, you on for the second time? Ms. Willis?
I apologize. I didn't have my phone on mute. And
I got you. Go ahead.
Okay. I just have one quick question. So that money that was requested for reimbursement for FEMA, because I know we are now being told that expenses that we use for COVID-19, sure we coded in our expenditures. Mr. Donald, when that money comes back from FEMA, are the people, will these budgets be replenished that are being reduced or amended?
No, that's not my plan or intent. I think at the time that those things would be reduced, so we're not going to be in a better financial situation. It would only be worse. And so if we got any additional new revenues, it would be my advisement to use those as a part of covering your other losses. So there are projects that would go away. The bulk of the funding that would be returned. So let's say I think it's 1.3 million. I'm looking at the document here, is covering things that are not likely to be reduced in the near future. That would include overtime and other personnel related costs. That's a very small drop in the bucket, but it's just 100% COVID related. I think also we have new expenditures that are included in these budgets that once were not. Remember, we didn't have to buy a mask and glove and all type of protective equipment and hand sanitizing stations and all of that good stuff that is going to have to come forward prior to any semblance of reopening. And so we wouldn't just add that 1.3 million to each of those department budgets. It would be my advisement to place those things in a contingency so that we're prepared for emergencies or immediate need for purchases as the city moves forward.
So my question is for the you all are submitting from our budget to get reimbursed from FEMA, because some of us are using money to buy gloves, hand sanitizers, and things to do COVID-related 19 functions within our districts. Are we able to get that reimbursed?
So I would,
Can I respond to that?
I believe those things are being included in our reimbursement as long as they're tracked. We're tracking all of those purchases, but we're not looking at individual pools. It's really citywide. So citywide, we're having reductions of approximately, I mean, it looks like about 20% from Mr. Malazzi's projections. So across the board, there are a lot of holes that are popping up. And as money comes back in the door, it's to plug in all of those required holes that are being filled. So I'm not quite sure about what you mean by departments and how we are satisfying them. They have to try to beat the budget moving forward, even of the funds that we do have, because we do not know exactly how this is going to impact us. I'm not sure
Hello?
where you at on that.
Are you here?
Ms. Gilliard, you need to mute your phone.
And can I also put a comment on Mr. Donald to say, even if we receive the money from federal government, remember that one will be one-time revenue. You can't make your budget depending on one time. So this reduction of wherever we are, this is what will be our 2021 budget. Will be starting from there. Unless things improves, then we can make adjustments there. But we will start our 2021 budget with what we have after this reduction.
So you're
Because
saying that
whatever we are going to receive will be one-time revenues, and we can't
Mr.
depend on
Malazzi,
one-time revenues.
Mr. Malazzi, I appreciate that explanation, and I do truly understand that. My question, Mr. Donald, is the money that we are requesting to get reimbursed back from FEMA, are you saying that we won't get those funds until probably the fiscal year 2021?
That's what I've been told. I mean, I would refer that question to Mr. Malazzi. He's actually overseeing the receipt of that under his leadership. And so those are the numbers that we've been hearing from everyone, is that the reimbursements could likely come back towards the end of our fiscal year in that September, October timeframe.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Gilliard, your second go round.
I've been in the queue, Mr. Mayor. I don't know
I
what's
have
going
been-
on. I had people talk twice.
Excuse me.
I haven't talked twice.
Excuse me. This is your second go round.
I know. I just want to bring back the fact that I didn't get an answer to my T-SPLOS question, and the question that I have is that it is sales tax driven. We know that we're not going to get the sales taxes that we anticipate, but the revenue and expenses have not been reduced, and I asked why.
Because those are more so fixed costs, and you're looking at, I know that we've received the 2019 allocation. That's what you've received, and that's what we've been working off of now. Those additional projections haven't been provided as of yet. They should over the next few weeks. And so remember, when we talked about this last week, one of the notes was that this is based off the projections and current revenues that we have, also based off of our need to cut the available spending in real time based on the COVID-19 pandemic. So it is very likely that as we receive new revenues, or if those revenues drop even more significantly, that this would be updated and brought before you. And so it's just timing wise on T-SPLOS, if I understand your question correctly.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Khalid, second time.
Hey, I'm going to yield to Councilman Baker because he hasn't spoken. You can yield back, Mr. Baker.
Well, he's on the list, Mr. Khalid.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Cleed. It's fine. I'm on the list eventually. Just
you're on the
everybody
list.
speak twice.
Okay, so just quickly, I wanted to ask about 3 particular departments that have not started. And I'm asking in the context of how that affects our revenue, and if it's been contemplated in this budget amendment, or if this is going to be something that we decide in the FY21 budget. One is the issuing of liquor licenses. I have some new businesses on All National that have been asking about when those might begin again. And then our courts, and particularly around our code enforcement board and our code enforcement courts. I understand that some of the holdup has been just coordinating with East Point around their jail, but like that's not an issue for code enforcement board. Neither is the public defender. Like they don't really get involved in our code enforcement cases. So particularly liquor licenses and code enforcement, because I do think that those are some revenue streams that we're missing out on. So my question for Mr. Donald or Mr. Malazzi is, when are we going to be starting those back up again? And is that a part of this budget, or you're doing that in the FY21 budget?
So as far as receiving liquor licenses and things of that nature, I believe that you'll have, they will be a part of I think with your changes to the scheduling, it would be on the last June council meeting, because remember, that's where you have your hearings and your regular business. And so those are already in process. We didn't have, of course, a set meeting schedule, which is why we requested that set meeting schedule at the last meeting. So now we can incorporate them in the same way that we have before, and similar to virtual court, we will be, which will also begin this month. Both of those things, notification will go out to the impacted parties, a couple of weeks before so that they can prepare, and then they'll be on the agenda as regular, and there's no action required or needed to be taken.
Because just to push back a bit, I am being told that the South Fulton Police Department isn't accepting any new alcohol permit requests right now.
So what you asked was when would they start coming back before council, and so that
No, I literally meant when will the process begin? Nothing can come before council until.
Well, some of them have already been in the queue. So I think that's what I was referring to when you were asking when they were coming. I'm assuming you were asking about someone that is being held.
So I'm asking both ways. The ones that are being held.
I answered the first one, and then the second one of when they will start receiving those, I'll defer to the chief. It'll be a part of the full reopening for in person, but I believe we're working to do the online ones this month as well. And then you asked about FY20. What were you asking about for FY20?
Well, I'm sorry. Could we, Chief Meadows? Could we hear from? Is he on the line about?
Yes. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we could start accepting those at any time. I do know that some of the ladies have gotten some of them. We had stopped processing fingerprints and the criminal history checks because of the pandemic. But when we start the reopening, because we insist that some of those people, after they apply online, that they have to come in person to get their fingerprints taken and get their criminal histories checked. And that's the process.
Where would they come? Because I know the old national fingerprint machine has been down. Do they come to Cascade?
No, well, we have we have portable fingerprint capabilities now.
Okay.
So I mean that's kind of been a non-issue for us for a while now.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Khalid. Mr. Baker.
Thank you, sir. I have a question regarding roads. I was trying to get Antonio Valenzuela on. Is he on?
Is Mr. Valenzuela on?
Yeah, all of the department heads are on.
Yeah.
Can you speak to the roads in District 7 that we went out and surveyed that we spoke to constituents about being a part of this budget amendment?
Write that number down for me.
Councilwoman Baker, can you hear me?
Councilman Baker's here, yeah.
Yes, sir. With regards to Crawford Road, it is one of the roads that are in high need to be resurfaced. Actually, it is a road that's in need of reclamation. It is our hope that upon approval of the budget amendment, we can take that needed road on your district.
Okay, and what about the bridge that was actually falling down at Oakley Township? Is that a part of that?
No, sir. No, sir. That bridge is under federal guidelines, and the work that we've done was an interim fix to allow the bridge to be serviceable while Georgia DOT is in the process of designing, acquiring the rights way, and going to construction.
Okay. Thank you. So that would be a part of this amendment. Thank you. I appreciate it. I just wanted to ask that. But also, while I have city manager as well as Mr. Malazi available, I wanted to ask you guys about the progress of the police department, as well as the possibility of you guys reaching out or furthering conversations based off of that project exceeding our expectations financially and the building across the street. Either one of you guys can take a stab at it. I know that they've reached out to both of you.
Yeah, so we haven't made any progress on any new acquisitions that have not been included in the current capital year budget, and any interest that has been provided for any leases or space allocations or whatever it is where folks have expressed it to the city, or if the city has an interest, those have been coordinated through T. Dallas Smith and Company, and so we wouldn't have those available today. But I can tell you there's been no action on what all of us refer to as the doctor's building, And in the current building, and Mr. Valenzuela is on, he oversees capital projects. He can discuss Old National, I guess we're calling it the old Ingalls building. That building, they have come to a design agreement internally where they do believe that they'll be able to deliver that project within budget. I know that was a few questions and concerns of the council. They are on the same page there, and so we're confident that we can do that. Mr. Valenzuela, you have anything that you need to chime in related to that?
Yes, sir. For the council, on the safety building, we have discussed and been able to negotiate first with the landlord of the facility, which we have received a credit of $120,000, as well as we've been able to negotiate a free rent for the month of January. So the landlord will be has provided to us an alternative to apply the credit for the next approximately 6 months that we will not be paying rent up to the month of September, if I'm not mistaken. With regards to the design, we were able to get with our design consultant who was approved at $100,000 originally for the design of the safety building. The consultant was very graceful in providing us up to 4 alternatives. We have discussed that with our police and courts, and we have agreed that alternative 3 at a higher square footage will be the best scenario for the city that will allow police to vacate the location, the precinct location at Old National Highway, as well as the other precinct out of Fulton and Dutcher Boulevard. And our courts will stop paying rent if we follow with alternative 3 presented by the designer, with the goal of having that constructed by January 2021. So those 2 groups will be able to utilize that. But we haven't finalized everything with the consultant, and we're at further directions on how to move. But those are the current the current positions on the landlord and the designer at the safety building on Old National Highway.
Okay, thanks. I know that you guys have probably been conferring with Chief Meadows regarding that. Do you have any comment regarding that, Chief Meadows?
No, not right now. It's been kind of a long and tedious process, but certainly it seems like we're making progress in the right direction. And so we just want to make sure we kind of keep the ship headed in the same direction so that we can kind of get this thing built out sooner rather than later.
Thank you. And lastly, Mr. Mayor, would I continue now or come back?
Yes,
I have one more question.
I think you have, Mr. Pascal should be in your chat box as much time you have. But go ahead.
Okay, well, yeah, lastly, I just wanted to say, this is the second year that the Development Authority has been excluded. We're from our budget. We're moving into the second budget year without having any allocation. And given the financial situation of the economy, and we've added 2 more members, and the mayor and council both publicly spoke in the meeting 2 months ago prior to COVID, definitely about providing funds for the Development Authority in this upcoming budget amendment. And I was wondering, given that we have a project of $450 million, which is about 4 times what our budget is, and we've been super conservative, not knowing where our next penny was coming from. And, several council members have asked about programs for small businesses during this crisis and things of that nature. And because of our lack of funding or lack of knowledge on the next source of funding, we have been very conservative when it comes to that regarding staff, attorneys, and programs. And I was just wondering whether Mr. Donald or Mr. Malazzi had any response regarding allocating the budget for the Development Authority in the contingency.
Okay, Mr. Malazzi.
That was not considered because it has to be a directive from the council, and I don't think we even discussed, me and Mr. Donald, we never discussed about that either.
So I think what we have discussed is putting funds in the contingency to carry on projects of the council, and that the council can direct us in how to use the funds. If the council has oversight instruction on where they would want such funds to come from, whether it be the contingency, which has received some a little bit of additional funding now, or from some other source. That directive we'd be available to comply with under the guidance of the council.
Okay, so
Go
I'm
ahead.
not clear. Would that be something that we could I can make a motion on today, or is that done already?
Yeah, so you would have, if in any of these areas, so this is, in short, the staff recommendation on how to allocate funds. If you have specific areas that you are seeing where you want those additional funds to go, then you would simply say, hey, or if you say, hey, Mr. Donald, or Mr. Malazzi, I don't want to put $100,000 for this project or that project. I'd rather reduce it by this and move those funds here. Or I see this amount in the contingency and it doesn't have an allocation. I want it to be here. Or reduce the PPE, whatever it is, the guidance would come from the council and then we would adjust the budgets accordingly.
Well, if that's the case, I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Mayor and Council, to direct some funds for the Development Authority for this to move forward.
I second.
Madam Attorney, Ms. Parliamentary.
Yes, Mayor.
Madam,
Yes, Mayor.
being that this is a special call meeting, is that motion in line?
It is my understanding, and tell me if I'm incorrect, is that it was germane to the budget discussion. So as long as it's germane to something that's on the agenda, as long as it's germane to a topic on the agenda, it's allowable.
All right. Thank you so much for the record. We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Yes.
This is Councilwoman Rao. Just for clarification, I thought we had allocated the $100,000 for the Development Authority. Isn't that money still available to them?
No, the Development Authority hasn't been funded in the last budget. That was misrepresented.
So there's no money.
We're still operating off of the year before last budget allocation of the initial $200,000 seed money.
So if that's so did it carry over is my first question. If so, how much money is left? And will our current deal that's pending before the Development Authority result in some fees? Because I know that most development authorities operate off the fees they generate. So I guess that's three questions.
Well, I think it's clear that part of the last meeting, I mean, there is, I believe, $519,935 that has to come to the city that the Development Authority will create. Now, if we want to make I could amend my motion and just say so that what's in contingency upon the conveyance of or that transaction, at least 200,000 can come to the Development Authority from the sale or upon the sale of, that conveyance.
So can I follow up, Mayor, with a follow-up question just to clarify?
But actually, before that, I would like to amend my motion to that exactly. So therefore, we wouldn't be touching the contingency, and we will only create the fund that the money for funding will come from, as recommended from Dr. Rao.
Is that seconded by is that okay by the second of the motion?
Yeah, that's fine. I second that.
All right, go real quick, Ms. Rao, because you
just a follow-up. So with also the and I know, I think you mentioned in the last meeting that the terms hadn't been outlined, but would any benefit back from the community or back to the city for the conveyance of the land come out of that 516 as well? So the difference.
The
is that what
difference
you're
would still
saying?
come to the city. Direct.
Well, wouldn't it come back to the development authority? Or,
Well, no,
or I guess the city.
no, because
You're
of
right. You're right. The city.
right.
The city. So it would come all from that 516 pot.
Correct. 519.
All right.
Can I say something,
Let
Mayor?
me excuse me. Let me make something clear. I see Miss Willis and Mr. Cleves back in the queue, and they've already been twice. But we're on this discussion right now. So I'm allowed Mrs. Willis and Mr. Khalid to speak on the discussion.
I have asked since the format.
Can I finish my question? I'm sorry.
Well,
I thought you had. Excuse me, Ms. Willis. I thought you had, Ms. Rao. Ms. Rao, what part of your question did you not get an answer to? Ms. Rao? Ms. Willis, go ahead.
Yes, so
I was a verification. As it relates to the IDAT, we don't have. Go ahead.
And so, I've asked since the formation of this development authority, and I've been very vocal. We have not received any budget information. We have not received any expense information. We have not received the IGA. We are being asked to fund the development authority. And as the funder of the development authority, we should be giving reports on this development authority. If we're funding the development authority, then we should be giving information. And I have yet to see any of that. I'm just hesitant. That's what my hesitation. I think I'm supportive of our development authority, but we're not getting any information. I don't understand that.
What
okay,
I'm
Madam
sorry.
Clerk, excuse me, Mr. Baker. Madam Clerk.
Yes, sir.
Would you read the motion again?
That's what I was trying to get Councilmember Baker, because I didn't really understand his motion when he amended it.
Okay, so my motion would be to use 200,000 of the 519,935 that has to be remitted to the city upon sale of the property to the development authority. That is currently that all finances are actually currently governed by our CFO Frank Malazzi, and he could ultimately prepare the worksheet document for everyone to see. And upon any time it's public documents, Mr. Malazzi could provide that information to council and the public. I mean, he's actually been keeping all of our records.
In light of all of that, Miss Clerk, what did you get as a motion?
Okay, to use 200,000 of the 519,935, the sale of the property, to disperse to the development authority. Is that the gist of your motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Of the 519 that will come back to the city, 200 could be remitted to.
Okay. So as we go into discussion, would you please keep your discussion germane to that motion? Ms. Willis, I think I stopped you, but you can go ahead.
Yes, that's it. Whether or not the information is being kept with Mr. Malazzi, what I'm saying, we're being asked to give money, but we're not being given information.
I got you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Khalid, this is the discussion.
Yeah, I just wanted to, there was a comment about development authorities receiving annual funds from city councils or county commissions, and several development authorities do. I was actually looking for the document, but I just wanted to state that fact that there are several development authorities that do receive annual funds from their municipal funder. That's it.
Yeah, Ms. Gilliard, did you have something I don't remember? Did you want to say something on the discussion? Okay. Let's vote, please.
Councilmember Rao?
Yes.
Councilmember Gumbs?
Yes.
Councilmember Willis?
Yes.
Councilmember Gilliard?
Yes.
Reeves,
Aye.
Khalid,
Yes.
Baker.
Same.
Motion
Okay.
passes to use
Motion.
200,000 of the 519,935 upon sale of property to the South Fulton Development Authority.
Okay. Now at that, Ms. Rao, you were in the queue, but you were speaking on the discussion. So you're now in the queue,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Rao. So,
Thank you. My question had to do with, I know HR and IT, cities have been subjected to cyber attacks, and I just want to make sure that there's nothing that we're doing in terms of these cuts that would make our city more vulnerable. And so are we confident that whatever these proposed changes, and I recognize they're coming from the department heads, they won't put us unduly at risk?
Yes, I think that's correct. I think the advisement on the financial side was 15%, submitted all of those to the department heads, and many had tough decisions, but they did not, in my opinion, and would not, make cuts that they believe would, completely ruin the service delivery of the city. I think that's why when it came down to it, Mr. Malazi highlighted that while we saw 15% in cuts, we're probably actually at about 12.5% or less, because otherwise we would start having negative impacts on our service delivery.
Okay, thank you for that. The IT is just really important given what we've seen happen with cities across the country, but particularly in Metro Atlanta over the last year and a half. So I just wanted to clarify that we don't think there's anything that would put us at risk. Thank you.
No, we don't believe so. I'm not to say that we won't have one of those attacks, because it's not impossible for us to be safeguarded, but I believe that under the knowledge of the IT director, he believes even if we had one of those issues, we'd be able to recover. And so as far as security goes, I defer to him on that, but if you'd like to hear from him, he is on here and available and can speak.
If he'd like to share, if not, I'm okay with what you've shared at this juncture.
Mr. Strickland, please provide your subject matter expertise and assurance.
Yes, Neymar Strickland, IT Director. Yeah, we're continuing to invest in the cybersecurity and work with partners. We didn't really do any cuts in those particular areas as it relates to this budget. It was primarily around personnel that we don't already have, but the partnerships and the things that we've discussed in the past will continue to move forward.
okay, Ms. Rao.
Thank you. I'm good.
Okay. Was that your last question, Dr. Rao?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Ms. Gumbs, your second go around.
Yes, I am trying to figure out, and this is probably a question for Mr. Donald. I do understand that we needed to cut the budget, and I know that the state is actually cutting their budget. What was the rubrics behind actually, making the decisions or the priorities for cutting the budget?
Well, so I'll tell you, I think we had prioritized the first go around when we made the suggested cuts, and they were solely based on being able to, well, not solely, it was jointly between being able to cut financially, but also service areas that could take a temporary impact in some of these short-term contracts. These cuts were almost wholly led by a need to make cuts financially. And so there are some service areas, or every service area is negatively impacted because the ability to fund them have been hurt. And so it is picking the best of the worst option is really kind of the rubrics that we did. We brought all 15% of the cuts across the board in. Received a review from Mr. Malazzi of where those service areas were, and then the department heads had a chance to chime in on the chief operations officer side, and then we took all of that information and made the cuts based on where the least significant impact could be. But there are, in every single area, we are cutting down to the bare bones, and so there are negative service impact. So we tried to make it the ones that were the least impact.
So when you say negative service impact, what does that necessarily look like? I know a lot of us depend on public works, especially with the cleanup of the roads, the cameras and things of that nature. What will that service look like for the residents?
Yeah, so that'd be a great example. Public safety would be a great example as well. So it means a delay in our implementation of some projects, for the most part, let's say in those two areas, because they're not only essential services or whatnot, but I think it also highlights some in-progress projects. So for public works, what we normally would have done is, let's say we receive, you know, about the $350,000 grant we received from GDOT. What we normally would have done is taken those additional funds and allocated them somewhere else. In this instance, receiving those $350,000 didn't allow us to put any additional funds for new projects. So services as they exist today will not be impacted, but new projects and new services or proposed projects and services would be impacted. So let's say we were on the schedule for 10 paving projects, but we had 3 proposed paving projects that we were going to ask for in the mid-year budget. Well, we have identified those 10 that were already scheduled and on track, and they will continue, but those additional 3 would go away because there's no funding.
Got you. Okay, thank you.
All right, we're gonna, Mr. Reeves, you're gonna be our last speaker for the day on this issue.
All right, thank you, Mr. Donald, Mr. Malazzi. Thank y'all for your leadership, and to the city staff for working tremendously on these amendments. A lot has been said. I completely understand everything that we have in front of us. However, I'm gonna ask Mr. Donald, Mr. Malazzi, could y'all provide a detailed narrative or a simple fact sheet on what these budget cuts mean, and for each department, and that to ensure that the constituency that we are not stopping services, we're not broke, and that we'll be able to share with the public, because all people heard today in some cases is $11 million shortfall. And so if we can provide that detailed narrative that we could share with the constituency through the city, that would be great. And if it's something that can happen, how soon will we be able to get that out? That's all I had.
Yeah, I believe with all of the budget amendment recommendations, Mr. Malazzi provides a PowerPoint overview, but also a memorandum that shows those cuts. I thought that was usually during the second read. I'm not sure if it's been provided in the first read, so I have to defer to Mr. Malazzi on that, but definitely all of those memorandums, PowerPoints, all of that stuff is made public. And I believe there's, when I have reviewed them in the past, there are, those details that you're asking for. So Mr. Malazzi, you can confirm if those were submitted as a part of this process, and if not, when they would be available for the council and the public.
So the memo is more important than we have the budget ordinance that you are going to consider. The budget ordinance is supported by the memo. So all the details of what happened, why we went into proposing the budget cut is in the memo. I can resend it, and I'm sure the clerk's office, they sent it on Friday. So I'll forward it to all of you, the budget ordinance, as well as the memo and this presentation. And the only thing that you remain, I think, is what Councilman Karid has already asked to say, that you need to know how much was adopted, the cut, and what's remaining in your budget now. So for you council people, it's much, much easier because it's 10,000 flat fee. So your budget was 196, let's say 10,000. So your current budget will be 186, but we will put together and I'll send it to you. But the budget ordinance, the memo, and the presentation, you have them again today.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Malazzi, they were
Thank you.
all included in the agenda packet.
Yeah, thank you.
yes, sir.
I thought so. But the only thing that you don't have, that the clerk didn't have, because we had to work throughout, is this presentation that you don't have. But you should have the memo as well as the budget ordinance. But
We
Okay.
have that.
Okay, Madam Clerk, let's next item, please.
So council is agreeable that this is the first read.
That's what the agenda says.
Yes.
I'm just making sure.
Yeah.
Okay. The next item is council discussion on rescheduling the public hearing for the zoning rewrite ordinance.
Yeah, so
Who's making this presentation? Mr. City Manager?
Yeah, so we will actually, I have Ms. Winfield, and I think you guys had asked, instead of the one-off meetings, that we are prepared to have our new deputy be introduced as a part of this. And so we have Ms. Cummings, who has recently joined us and serves as the deputy, as well as Ms. Winfield, and they will be prepared, to provide any info or answer any questions. But in short, we have provided a proposed schedule with those dates. And if there's any input from the council, while those are a draft, you do know that your moratorium is to end on the 30th. And so anything that goes outside of the draft that has been provided, we just have to keep into account two things. One, you may have to extend that moratorium. Two, there is a 14-day advertising period and associated cost. And so if those things are going to change, we would just want to know, of course, through any actions that you take today, on what timing you would like, and so that we can make the adjustments and post it accordingly. So just keep in mind that any changes require 14 days before that particular new meeting day.
Okay, Mr. Khalid.
So I've been having conversations with many of my colleagues, and I think that we cannot afford to get this wrong. And I understand there might cost a few extra dollars and a few extra days to re-advertise, but I don't think that should be a factor in our decision making of making sure that we get this zoning right. I just want to remind my colleagues that when we rushed with the comprehensive plan, we ended up passing a comprehensive plan that we now are stuck with for several more years. So I would like to just start by making a motion to extend our moratorium until September 30th, which is the end of our fiscal year.
second.
Been properly moved and second. Discussion.
And then for discussion, I would just also like to note, it's a question. Let me not make the assumption. I have not seen that our current moratorium has made any, moratorium. I haven't seen that our current zoning rewrites, the parts that I've read, because I've not read all of it, have not made a suggestion about combining or revising our code enforcement board and our code enforcement courts. And one of though the code enforcement board often levies heavier fines, they're almost impossible to collect. versus the code enforcement court. They're just legal mechanisms to collect that money and make sure that we receive it. And I think that that has to be a part of our review as well. And that's also why I'm choosing this new fiscal year date, because I think that that needs to be incorporated in our decision making.
Any further discussion on this motion?
Yes, I have discussion.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I did read it. I read it from front to back, with the exception of the overlays. I only read the overlay for my district because I knew that my colleagues would read their own overlays. And I submitted a quite lengthy response. I haven't gotten any feedback to that response, but I did get feedback from a constituent who does have a zoning background. And his comment was, this is a developer's dream. And all I get out of it from page to page is density, density, density. So it does have some things that really need to be addressed. And this, to me, is just to show you to what extent. How can you permit horse racing in an agricultural overlay? That makes no sense to me. And so there's a lot of things in there. I definitely agree that it should not be rushed. Whatever we have to do, we need to have some meaningful conversation about it, and it might take a little bit longer, but we're going to be stuck with this for numerous years. And that's one of the more reasons why we need to really take a real deep dive into it. And it's true, after going through it from page to page, all I see is density, density, 3- and 4-story buildings. I mean, it's just overwhelming and a bit much. And the overlays, I don't know about any other overlay, but the overlay for District 4 that really wants to remain not totally rural, but low density and not whatever, that's been completely and totally changed. And then, this is the last point, and then in one of the footnotes was giving developers a bonus for bringing density. So I definitely highlighted that. So I agree with the delay. That's all I'm trying to say.
All right, thank you.
Discussion.
Councilmember Willis.
Yes. And so I just want to clarify something. We were advised to go ahead and approve the comprehensive master plan because we were told that was necessary for us to get a qualified status for us to approve grants. None of us wanted to approve that because we knew that that plan was done by the county and it did not reflect what the city wanted. And I was told once we got finished with this plan, the ordinance, that we were going to go back and make an update to the comprehensive development plan. And so I do have concerns about this ordinance, and I've expressed that because from the word go, when we brought Woods on, I've always advocated an overlay in the Welcome All community, and for some reason it was not done. And I know that you all are saying that it takes community input, but that should have been factored in from the word go because I heavily advocated for that.
Okay.
Yes, and that's
Councilmember Gumbs.
So I am pretty much echoing probably all of the comments that my colleagues have made. I do feel like this process is rushed. I did reach out to provide some type of feedback and have not gotten a response. There are a lot of missing pieces per se that is in the zoning. It's very convoluted. And again, there are some things that are missing in regards to possibly, town center overlay and things of that nature that we're trying to see how we can get in this zoning rewrite. So I think delaying it is a very smart decision. I don't want to be in the same position that we were in before, where the comprehensive plan was, approved, and we were told that we were able to go back and amend it, and it was still a continuous fight. So, and I think, we do need to have more citizen engagement and input. So at this time, I agree with my colleagues, but I wanted to go on record that it's just a lot of information that's convoluted. None of the language is standard across the board, even though the overlays kind of are similar in some aspects, but it's confusing. So I definitely support, holding it off.
Okay, Mr. Baker, I see that you wanted to speak. Mr. Baker.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I just wanted to ask our deputy if we could just have a quick overview or would be considered like uses when we vote.
You asking for a presentation of
no, not a presentation, just a brief overview of like uses, because that's what we're going to not allow until September, just for the benefit of the public.
Assistant County Manager, is that something you can answer? Mr. County Manager?
City Manager.
City Manager, I'm sorry. Mr. City Manager?
I'm sorry, I've been trying to unmute. He asked, well, I didn't hear that last part. I heard it about light uses, but there was something after that.
No, I said for the benefit of the public. I just wanted a brief overview. I know nail salon, tire shops, things of that nature, but I'm thinking especially in the Old National area in particular, but a general brief overview on what like uses would be.
All right, let's see if we can get you asked for somebody from specific. I have the ACM or Ms. Cummings on. Oh, they're on mute. They have to be unmuted.
Mr. Adams, can you do that?
Madam Clerk, would you unmute?
I think they're doing that.
Cummings, and she's on now. Ms. Cummings?
Hello, good afternoon. This is Christina Cummings, the newly appointed deputy director for community development and regulatory affairs. First, I want to just say thank you. This is a new process. I've been working over the last 3 weeks to really get up to speed on all of your feedback and all of your concerns. Everything that you are raising is duly noted, and I will definitely go back to the team at Wood with these concerns. In terms of the light uses, I will have one of my planners that has been working on this project from the beginning, Mr. Dana Gray, to kind of chime in and give that technical definition of what those light uses are, and try to field any questions, as he's been more involved with this process from the beginning with the consultant. So if Mr. Dana Gray, who is on the line, if he could be unmuted, I'll allow him to opine and share those technical definitions.
We also will make sure, I think it was just an oversight, but I know some of we've got Wood watching, but I don't think we added them to the queue because we thought most of the questions were going to be about the schedule more than the actual product. But we will make sure that to have them on, they are required to watch this segment. So I just wanted to make sure that the council knew that. So we're relaying this information to them in real time. So all of these comments will be captured as well.
Good day, Mayor and Council. Great. If I remember correctly, I heard like uses being mentioned in the overlay. Is that what you're referring to, Mr. Baker?
Yes.
Okay, so some like uses could be along the areas of sidewalks, how sidewalks are designed, lights, how lights are designed, the type of lights, materials of buildings such as brick and stone, how signs are handled, whether window signs are allowed or restricted, There seem to be similarities along those lines for the overlay districts. Does that give you a general idea of similarities?
No, I was thinking more in terms of the types of businesses.
I think,
so.
If I may say something, Mr. Baker, I've been dealing with this like use situation, especially on National Highway, and we just been basically saying that businesses of like use, hair salons and stuff like that, inundated an area. So that was what we meant back in Fulton County when we said like use. You know, not to have 10 barbershops on one block.
You're correct, Mr. Mayor. That's what I was trying to get to.
Right. That's exactly what we mean. So, you know, if you got to spread out your uses, you don't need that many of the same thing to serve in a community.
Was your question answered, Mr. Baker? I don't.
Well, I mean, it was almost answered by the mayor, but I was trying to find out if there was an itemized list that the public could benefit from by hearing it from our planning department, so that they would know that that's something
like what's in each category. What is in each use category? Is you're looking for an itemized list? So do tire shops fall under this category? Do hair salons fall under this category? And then let that guide whether you are restricting like uses or not.
If that is what I'm asking, if it's possible, or if we can at least come up with a list and provide it and make it public somehow.
So if this is Mrs. Cummings, if I could just offer a little insight. With the reorganization of the zoning ordinance, there are tables that are in the ordinance that simplify what uses in a particular area are approved. And so when you look through the table, it will go down and put X's by applicable uses within that footprint. So there have been some edits in the actual zoning ordinance rewrite document to simplify that, to provide that table. But I will work with the consultants and my team to tease those uses apart and provide a briefing packet to the council.
Thank you.
I think, Madam Attorney. Madam Attorney.
Yes, Mayor.
I think you probably need to engage in this conversation also when time comes, because you do not want to infringe upon anybody's property right. So
yeah, that's correct, Mayor.
Yeah, if they want to have, as this conversation continues to go over days, weeks, whatever, you must continue to be there to make sure they do not infringe upon people's property right.
Yeah, and if Ms. Cummings, if you can make sure that I'm included and we're copied, we'll certainly help advise the city on that, Mayor.
Okay, I got Miss Councilwoman Ryle in there, and then we'll stop here and go and vote.
I think I just want to provide some. I'll say something on the upbeat. I do think the consulting firm did a good job of collapsing. I think it was over 30 chapters into 10. So I do think it's very easy to follow. And so I love the addition of the tables because you can see what's allowed and what's not. So I appreciate that. I did see that, particularly reading in the overlay, they still have, in my opinion, a lot more things in common than not. And I know the consultant, based on feedback we previously received, really didn't appear to change that much. But when you read through it, a lot of the initial text in certain areas are the exact same verbiage from overlay to overlay. So it just seems like even if you said these are common to all of these, it's the exact same narrative, and it makes that section so much larger. So that was just a general thing. But I've read all the chapters, and sometimes I notice once you're going through, you almost have to read through the whole thing because you'll think something's not addressed, and then you'll come upon it later in another chapter. But I've provided all my feedback in writing per the process. So thank you.
Okay. I'll hear from Mr. Reeves, then we'll vote. Mr. Reeves?
Yeah, that was earlier. My question has been answered, sir. Thank you. Let's go vote.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Let's vote, please.
The motion is to extend the moratorium to September 30th. Councilmember Rao,
Yes.
Gums,
Yes.
Willis,
Yes.
Gilliard,
Yes.
Reeves,
Aye.
Khalid,
Absolutely, yes.
Baker.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, before we go any further, Madam Clerk, I just want to say that in light of what has happened this weekend in the city of Atlanta and other cities, our police department did an excellent job in assisting where they were needed. However, upon last night, I think it was, there was an ordinance passed by the city putting in a curfew. As a result of that, Chief Meadows called me and felt that we may need to take the same approach because the people who were doing all of the looting and stuff did not know where the city limits were. I was mighty afraid that those people would come over and do something in our city. Several cities, Savannah and others, have taken this position. We thought that the governor, once Atlanta did their curfew, that the governor would take Atlanta's curfew and make it, if not for the county, for the state, but he fell a little short of doing that. So in conversation with the chief, I asked our city attorney, Madam Attorney, you on, right? I've asked the Madam Attorney to look at the language of Atlanta and come up with something. If we wanted to do that, we could do that. We could not have done it same time Atlanta did because unlike them, we had to wait till we have a meeting. So first of all, Madam Attorney, this is a
yes, Mayor.
This was considered a very important thing for us. That's why it's not on this list. Are we okay if it's if this request is something of this nature that we can handle it today at a special call meeting?
Can Ms. White, can you put up the agenda one more time? So wait, we have all council members who are present, correct?
Right.
And Ms. White, can you put up the agenda?
Yes, we're getting it up in just a second.
And the only reason I'm asking, Madam Attorney, is that the fact that we consider this an emergency ordinance, and this is the first opportunity we could get to get it voted on.
Yes.
I know it's not on the agenda. That's why I'm asking the question.
So, okay, let me.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a point of order while we're waiting on this?
Sir, go ahead.
I'm not sure that we actually concluded the second item on the agenda, so we postponed. We have a zoning moratorium extension, but I'm not sure that we addressed the city manager's concerns about the schedule of dates of hearings now that we're not bound by the 30th.
All right. Let's do this, Madam Attorney.
Yeah, and I do have an answer, Mayor.
What's your answer?
Yeah, so about adding and this is the issue of the curfew.
Yes.
Yeah, so you can add this to the agenda. And I want to clarify that you have two things that will allow you to weigh whether you add it. You have state law and you have your charter. Now, because you have all council members who are present, if nobody objects, then you can address this issue at the meeting.
Right. And what
because your charter says that you have to give everyone notice that you're going to talk about it.
Right.
So because that notice is required, if you add something the day of and someone doesn't like it, then it invalidates the action because they're entitled to have more notice than just hearing about it at the meeting. So if everyone unanimously says we're willing to discuss this and waive our right to notice under the charter, then you have no issue under the charter. And then under state law, because this has been properly noticed under state law, you would just need to move to amend the agenda and for the council members to waive their right to have at least the 48-hour notice before this is heard.
That's good. I understand now. Let me drop back to Mr. Khalid. Before I ask that question, if we did not finish that motion, and I understand from Mr. Donald that that second part was not answered, right?
That's correct, man.
Okay, so I'll take a motion, Mr. Khalid, if you want to make one to do that.
No, I don't have a motion. I just thought that, I think that we probably need more discussion as a group about whatever the calendar is going to be going forward now that we're not constrained by this June 30th deadline.
So we made a motion that had to do with the extending the moratorium. That's what you're saying, right?
Yes. So we extended.
And now rescheduling the public hearing is another issue.
Yes.
And I'm saying I will entertain a motion to reschedule the public hearing.
I thought we did that to September.
September.
We did the moratorium. We did the moratorium.
We did the moratorium. To be clear, we extended the moratorium to September 30th so that we would not have to have a timeline that was completed by June 30th.
Right.
But I think with the schedule, wouldn't Ms. Cummings need to talk with the consultant to reschedule those meetings?
And hopefully that's occurred.
I'm sure she would have to.
So maybe suspend the meetings that are proposed for, well, they were the ones that were in May and June, and maybe just reach back out with a proposed new schedule versus us trying to approve some dates now.
Correct. But we do need some guidance.
I couldn't hear you, Mr. Donald.
Yes, we do need some guidance on that. So initially, the council has all stated in some capacity or another that you would like more time on the moratorium. At minimum, we need some type of time frame within you would want to get it complete into September 30th so that we can coordinate with Wood, address any additional costs, but even address any timelines, as well as get prepared for the 14-day notice. So in lieu of us just pulling some days out that might work for Wood, it would work to say, hey, the 30th of June was our deadline. Can we make it July or August? I mean, we need that type of guidance from the council, a date that, is 30 days out or not to exceed 45, but some type of guidance on even that's where you're looking at.
And that's what I meant when I asked for a motion.
I would like to make a motion that our deputy director confer with Woods Consulting to devise the timeline that would meet the requirements for public notice for a change to our zoning ordinance to be completed within a 45-day time limit.
Second.
Properly moved in second. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor?
Councilmember Baker.
Aye.
Aye for Mr. Baker.
Councilmember Khalid. Councilmember Khalid. Councilmember Reeves.
Aye.
Councilmember Gilliard. Councilmember Gilliard. Councilmember Willis.
Yes.
Councilmember Gums.
Yes.
Councilmember Rao.
Yes.
That's five for yes and 2 abstain.
Okay. At this time, I would just like to ask the group, based on what the attorney just said, is there an appetite to have this discussion concerning a curfew on this agenda?
So Mayor, we can have it, but we'll have to first ask that question.
We got to see if there's an appetite for it first.
Why
That's
would
what I'm
an
to say.
appetite? I don't understand.
Madam Attorney?
Yes, I guess I'll explain the process if there is an appetite for the discussion. How about that?
Right. Yes. Is there something in all of it? If one abstains, we don't talk about it. Am I correct?
Yeah, if one abstains, then we can't do this process. That's correct.
Okay, and is there anybody who would not like to have this discussion today?
I think, I mean, I don't want to be the only person abstaining, but I think that this is a discussion that the public should have notice of.
Okay, so your answer is you don't want to have it today.
I don't want to have it without notifying the public. No.
Okay, well that's that.
Mayor?
Just a minute, Madam Attorney.
Yes, Mayor.
It does not preclude us from bringing it back. I don't know if it's going to be worth bringing it back another time, but just in case, we can bring it back on the agenda. Is correct?
Yes, you can bring the issue back.
Mr. Mayor?
Don't we have
I
a
hear you, Ms.
tomorrow?
Willis. I hear you. Okay, go ahead, Madam Attorney.
Yeah, you would need, so technically if Councilman Khalid objects today, he would be able to object tomorrow too, because that wouldn't be 48-hour notice. So we would have to confirm with him if he would be okay with tomorrow, since it's less than 48 hours.
There
But that
is
would
no
give
meeting tomorrow.
No, I'm not saying we should. I'm not implying that we should have a meeting on tomorrow, ma'am. I'm just saying at any other time, based on
yeah,
notice.
as long as you give 48 hours, then
I
you
got
can have the meeting at another time. That's
I got
correct.
Ms. Willis, go right ahead.
Before we just say no, I mean, I just think that's real disrespectful for our officers who's been busting their butts for the past 2 days, keeping the city safe and fighting our protesters. I think that we need to hear guidance from our police chief, because Mayor, the police chief has called you and several council members and expressed the need for this curfew.
Well, let's bring Chief Meadows on. I think you're correct. Chief Meadows? Chief Meadows, are you there?
Yeah.
Chief.
I mean,
he's having some technical difficulties. Could you get on the phone, Chief?
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to, in light of, we see what all the protesting have done and to damages of city property and public property. I just want to, just for clarity, if anything comes to the city limits of Fulton and it's damaged, be it property or public property, would the city be on hook for repairing that? For the repair?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
No, I don't. Yeah, I hear you now.
Mayor, can you hear me?
Mr. Reeves, I don't
Yes,
think so. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr.
Mayor, can you hear me?
I hear you now. Chief, I can hear you.
He acting up. Now it's acting up.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes,
No.
we can hear you.
Hear a remix version.
Mayor.
Yes.
Mayor, can you all hear me now?
Getting a lot of feedback.
Okay.
We can hear you now.
I'm trying to. So can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
You can hear me now? Okay, good. I was probably going through a really bad area. Okay, so what happened with the city of Atlanta was they enacted their ordinance, and one of the things that we were concerned about.
So you guys, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but if we're going to talk about this topic, I don't want us to do it in a manner that would invalidate what you do. I mean, I think you're going to have to take up the issue of Councilman Khalid first before we are able to engage in this discussion.
Why are you preempting the police from making a statement?
Well, because it is a topic that is not on the agenda, and we have one councilman who's objected to this discussion. So technically, anything that you do won't be valid because of that. So my recommendation is that if you can talk to Councilman Khalid, it will allow us to perfect the technical handicap that we have currently.
Mr. Mayor, I just don't understand. We got to do something about this in our charter
How
because
many attorneys do we have?
we have to. I'm addressing the.
Excuse me. Keep your comments to yourself. If you are not recognized by the chair, please keep your comments to yourself.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Williams.
Mr. Mayor, this handicaps the protection of our residents. You receive many calls from residents asking whether or not we have a curfew. We're going to asking for curfews. Our police chief is saying we need a curfew. And you're saying that now our officers are out 24/7 trying to protect the city. They need a curfew and we can't even discuss it. Yeah, we need to address
that is what's opined by. So, as opined by the attorney, if Mr. Khalid does not change his mind, there's not much we can do right now. Or there's nothing we can do right now.
Okay, I'll make sure I let our residents know.
All right.
I have a comment because we've had a lot of discussion, and I just want to clarify my point, if that is okay, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, go right ahead, Mr. Khalid.
So I was at the protest on Friday. I cleaned up on Saturday, and I think that this is, if we're going to have a public conversation, I think all of the public should be here. That is just the principle of democracy, I think, as vital as the protection of property versus the value of Black lives. So I think that if we want to have a discussion about protecting private property, then and if we want to have a discussion about that, then we should just call an emergency meeting and give notice so that all the public can be here. We only need, 2 days notice, so we could have this meeting on Wednesday if it's.
Well, you can have it tomorrow if all of you consent. So you can you can have it. You can call this meeting as soon as we can get an email to the newspaper, which the clerk we would reset for a couple of minutes, or if you want to do it tomorrow, she'd have the whole day to do it. You can have the meeting right now or tomorrow. It's just a matter of everyone consenting if you're going to do it within less than 48 hours.
I have a question, Mayor.
Go ahead. I'm going to move on because I don't have time.
So I just want to know, what is the difference when we instituted a curfew early on in the pandemic? We had, I believe, a few people that were opposed to it then. So what is the difference now?
Right.
So the curfew in the pandemic, you did give all council members 48 hours notice, so you didn't have a timing issue there. So you just don't have the same. Everyone had the sufficient notice under the charter.
Well,
so
we didn't do. So I hate to interrupt, but we didn't do. We agreed that a curfew would be done on that day. It wasn't something that we had given anybody 24 hours notice. It was amended and offered, and it was accepted by the number of votes. So I don't understand what the difference
that day,
is.
but your agenda included that topic. Mm-hmm. So you had the requisite notice that went out to include that topic. So you gave everyone notice that you were going to talk about responding to COVID at that meeting. Whereas at this meeting, you have not sent out anything to say we're going to talk about a curfew at this meeting. So there are things that we can do to overcome that. But it would require it to be unanimous amongst you guys, amongst each other.
Let me ask the question. Well, let me ask the question for the record. Is there anyone else who objects to us not having the meeting today, a discussion today, besides Mr. Khalid? Okay, Madam Clerk. Madam Clerk.
Next is executive session.
Can we take about 5 minutes? Would you all be all right with that?
Yes, that's fine.
Let's take 5 minutes before we go into session, okay?
So are you going to come back and reconvene and get a motion to recess?
We can.
Mr. Mayor, do I need to make a motion, Mr. Mayor? Do I
Go
need
ahead.
to make motion to have us convene tomorrow to address the emergency curfew?
Madam Attorney?
So you can do it tomorrow. Councilman Khalid, is it okay? Will you object at the meetings tomorrow if the clerk is able to get sufficient notice to the newspapers? Councilman Khalid?
That's fine.
Yeah,
Okay.
so instead of making the motion, this is what I recommend. My recommendation is that the mayor just set the meeting and then we give out notice instead of the council voting on it.
Consider it done. All right.
Can't even protect our city.
We don't need a motion. We consider that'll be done. Madam Clerk, we'll get with you after this meeting, get that handled. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. I was suggesting a 5-minute break before we go into.
I move that we recess for 5 minutes.
What are we doing?
We're going to.
Mr. Mayor, I made a motion that we recess for 5 minutes as you suggested.
What are we doing? Can you tell me?
Mr. Mayor, I made a motion that we recess for 5 minutes.
Ms. Gilliard, we're talking about to executive session. I said, let's have a 5-minute break before we do that.
And what are we going to executive session for? All three?
Has that motion been made? No,
it hasn't.
Okay. Well, someone needs to make the motion first.
Well, I thought that she said we had to recess first.
I didn't say that. I asked if you were going to make.
I moved that we go into executive session for personnel, real estate, and litigation.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second.
Who seconded it?
Baker.
Councilmember Baker.
Okay. It's been properly moved. The second in discussion. Hearing now, let's go into executive session. With a 5-minute reset.
Thank you.
Mayor, is everybody going into the executive session?
We need to vote.
We
Yes.
should vote.
Let's
We
vote.
didn't vote.
Councilmember Rao.
Brown.
Councilmember Gums. Councilmember Gums.
I'm sorry, yes.
Councilmember Willis.
Yes.
Councilmember Gilliard.
No.
Councilmember Reeves.
Nay.
Councilmember Khalid.
Nay.
Councilmember Baker.
Does this include the 5-minute recess?
No, this is to go into executive session.
Yay.
The motion's failed, 4-3.
I need a motion to adjourn then.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Properly moved and second in discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor?
Rao.
Yes.
Gums.
Yes.
Willis.
No.
Gilliard.
Yes.
Reeves.
Aye.
Khalid.
Yes.
Baker.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you all so much.
We can't put a curfew into effect because Khalid.
Thank you so much.